Uganda has had several targets and plans, all geared at ensuring national development. Currently, we have the National Development Plan 1 that's only ending, and we're yet to begin with the National Development Plan 2. Also, we have Vision 2040, and sometimes there's so many plans and very little implementation. In studio now, we are joined by Dr. Joseph Muvawala, the Executive Director, National Planning Authority, to demystify these big plans, ask the hard questions, and maybe get several answers. You're welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening to you too.
Thank you.
To start us off, there is the National Development Plan, and then there is Vision 2040. Could you just give us the difference between the two?
The difference, the vision sets the aspirations of the country. Actually, it's not a plan. It's a vision. Any institution, any government should have a vision. Any human being should be able to dream. So what we have in the vision is what we aspire to be as a country in 2040.
Okay.
And the vision is to transform this country from a peasant economy to a middle income country. That's our vision. And for that to achieve that, we have to implement the vision through different plans. Given that the vision is 30 years, then we should have 6 plans. So for the vision, you are free to dream.
Okay.
For the plan, you begin to implement.
So now we move to the National Development Plan 2 that is only about to be rolled out.
Yes.
What will be your focus this time around? What are those particular sectors that you intend to prioritize?
Now, there are 2 things in approach. One, we have what we call the fundamentals, and we have what we call the opportunities. And this time, we intend to focus on a few fundamentals and a few opportunities. We know that this country still has serious challenges. And for the next 5 years, we intend to focus on the agriculture sector, the tourism sector, minerals, oil and gas sector. Those are all opportunities. And for the fundamentals, we are focusing on infrastructure and human capital development, in the full meaning of human capital development.
Okay.
Yes. And we can explain what is entailed in human capital development.
Yes, before we get into explaining what human capital development is, there is the aspect of, we have the plans. You have mentioned it before, so many plans, so little implementation. And it's been said before, these plans that you've laid out, what are you going to do differently to ensure that finally we have something there so that we have these plans implemented?
Focus. I think the biggest problem for any country is to focus and prioritize. I can give you a good example. In the last 5 years, you've seen that the stock of infrastructure in this country has improved tremendously.
That's true.
Tremendously. But what has been the decision by government? To focus on infrastructure. And that's what we are saying again. Focus, focus, and focus again. Because we have a lot of problems, multitude of problems, but we have to agree what are the critical problems. And all studies in this country tell us, the diagnostics we've done, that the most binding, and the catchword here is most binding, is infrastructure. The others are problems, fine. But the most binding at this point in time is infrastructure.
Of these sectors you mentioned, like you said, the previous years government has focused on infrastructure. What of the ones you've mentioned, which are they intending to focus on this time? One particular one. And we also need to look at what difference it can make, something that can be seen.
I think the transformation infrastructure projects that we have are a number, but the key are in energy. We have a problem of the cost of energy in this country. While it is generally known that for any industry to survive, you should get energy at around 5 cents. We are getting it up to the tune of 11 cents, Bijagali project. And we think the time has come now, in the next plan, first, to use public resources for energy projects. Because when we used other resources, a combination of private, we get high cost of the energy, the Bijagali case. Now, Isimba and Karuma, we project it to come at around 4.5 cents. So that shows you the difference between where you get the money and how you apply the money. So energy is going to be critical for us, because added to that is industrialization. And added to that is that you have to compete.
Yesterday you mentioned something about ensuring that the government manifesto fits into the National Development Plan. Now, we don't want a situation where we'll be, instead of the government manifesto fitting into the National Development Plan, getting the National Development Plan to fit into the government manifesto. How do you intend to manage that?
The one thing about planning, the plan is not the most important thing.
Okay.
It is the process. The process of planning. You get that right, there is no way a manifesto will differ.
Okay.
Because that manifesto is not being done by people outside this country. If we diagnose the problems properly, the way we have, tell me which government will come in power and say they don't need infrastructure? Which government will come in power tomorrow and say they don't need to improve the skills of their own citizens?
You can say that, but then governments always have their own agenda. There is the bit of, yes, let's develop the country, but there is also always the bit of we have to make sure we secure our agenda, our own personal agenda. So that's what we are trying to ensure, that their personal agenda does not differ from the vision of the entire country.
Actually, if I was voting in a government right now, in a government which would come and say infrastructure is not important, because what we do in the plan is that we lay out what should be done, and we are saying infrastructure. A government can come and prioritize standard gauge over Isimba, but they're all in the plan.
All right.
So what will happen at the manifesto could be a tweaking of what comes first, the sequencing, but not a total divergence.
Okay.
That I am sure. Because the guys who write that manifesto are economists like us. They live in this country like us. They diagnose this problem, and they have been part of the process of writing this plan. And this is a people's plan now. If we do it the right way, it should be a people's plan. And who should dare override a people's plan?
That remains to be seen. Now there is the National Development Plan 1
Yes.
is ending. What are those areas that you haven't performed so well in, that you're moving to the second the National Development Plan? And what went wrong? Why weren't you able to achieve these particular set targets?
The biggest problem with the first plan, that it was touching almost everything.
Okay.
And we had a problem of focus. But the critical problem in this country right now is implementation.
All right.
Implementation is the binding problem on the side of delivering the plan. That we have a long gestation period in preparation of projects, we have long delays in procurements, and we have governance issues. We are losing money over time, and we are holding money that we have borrowed while government is paying commitment fees and interest over it. And I think that is the biggest elephant in the room that we all have to fight in the next plan.
Yeah, now as you're mentioning money, how much do you plan to spend on this, the second National Development Plan, and where is it coming from?
Around about 185 trillion the next 5 years, of which close to 55% is public resources, and 45% is the private sector investment.
Do we have that kind of money? Isn't this a little bit too ambitious for us?
I could see, if I analyze the MTEF, the medium-term expenditure framework, which has been given to us by the minister, my parent ministry, Minister of Finance. When I add it up, it adds up to around 120 trillion over the five years, and with a projection, that gives you a gap of around 12 to 13 trillion. So the gap is not that wide. And remember, in that, you have also things like off-budget resources that we don't tend to track very well in this country. We don't yet have a system of tracking all these resources. So a lot of these resources, when you put them in and track them, we have the money. But we have also to borrow. And you can ask me from where, but we have to. And borrowing is not a bad thing.
Indeed, if we manage
it well, yes.
Borrowing, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that was Dr. Joseph Muvawala, the Executive Director, National Planning Authority, discussing with us the way forward with better planning for development of this country, focusing on one thing: specialization.